Is it not freaking out?
No, it doesn't seem like it is. Doesn't seem like it's freaking out just yet. Scott and I always freezes for us right in the beginning of the podcast,
like
just as we're getting into it.
I was like, I was like hedging a bit. Oh, wicked.
It's all good.
Yeah, but like the content thing, man, I'm just like, I've been trying to figure out. I've had a funny week, dude. I had a freaking funny week. I felt like this week, what is it? I guess the headline of the week for me has been like, why does everything have to be so hard?
Yeah, I know.
Like,
it's hard.
why is it hard? I mean, like, it's isn't it interesting? It's sort of like sometimes, like I think it's, and I'm not even sure that this week has been particularly hard. I don't think it has. I think that it's just been a regular week, but it feels like it. It feels like I've got some stuff that I want to do, and do you know what it is? I think I've got zero patience, and the world is telling me I need to be patient, and I'm just like, fuck you, world.
Yes,
I don't
know
want
what you
to be
mean.
patient.
Like, I want it now. I don't want it in a year. I want it now.
Exactly. It kills me.
Yeah.
Anyway, dude, when should you quit your day job? This is your idea. This is your idea. Do you get like a lot of questions about this? You do, right?
Yeah. I mean, I did that Q&A podcast a few episodes back too, where I just asked a bunch of questions, and I literally got hundreds of questions. That's amazing. I couldn't answer them all in the podcast. And so there were a few that sort of stuck out to me too, that like, that might need more exposition versus, just trying to answer them in a quick, 3 to 5 minute section in a podcast. And this is one that sometimes I get from people that really are wanting to make the jump to playing gigs, playing sessions. They want to become a full-time musician. Maybe they're in a different industry, or maybe they have always been in a band and playing stuff kind of on the weekends, but they've always had a day job, but they feel kind of like the day job is the golden handcuffs, right? Like it gives you money, it gives you security, but it's a trap. So what's that time where you should just double down and focus on music and substitute music for any word you like? Focus on your passion, focus on your side hustle, focus on, right? Was there a time for you? I'm so curious to know this, because to me, it feels like Scott Devine has always just been cool musician guy. Was there ever a time where you decided, okay, I'm doing this thing and it's going nowhere, and I need to pivot and really double down on what I am so passionate about, which might be bass, might be education, and I'd love to know about that process for you. Or was it more of kind of an organic flow into what you do now? Oh,
dude, I was not a strategic thinker when I was a kid. I was just a mess.
Yeah,
I was a mess. I was like soup. I was just imagine trying to hold soup in your hands. I was just like, what is going on?
It's not easy. Yeah.
There was definitely not that many. I was all heart, all gut.
Yeah.
So quick trajectory of like how I came to be a musician.
Mm-hmm.
I started playing. I was actually always into music from like when I was 13. I was always into music, so I started playing guitar. Really dug it, and it was kind of sort of like the only thing I was actually good at. Like really, truly, I was actually not that great at everything. Really struggled at school. Dropped out of school early, and then started to. I randomly and super luckily got an apprenticeship. Making basses as an apprentice luthier.
Overwater.
Overwater, getting paid I think £26 a week.
Whoa!
£26. So like $35 or $40 a week or something.
Wow. Yes.
Old school, dude.
That's child labor.
Through some kind of sort of like youth apprentice scheme, that the government had put on. I can remember just thinking like, I cannot even, like PB&J isn't even going to get me through this. But
yes, way to bring the PB&J back, man. I love it.
Always. Yes. So I ended up doing that thing, and then through that, I was doing my apprenticeship, and through that, I learned about the like that people could be a professional musician. I didn't know it existed before that time. I was like, if you'd asked myself when I was like, I don't know, like 15 or something, what are you going to be? I would have just said, I ain't got a clue. I've got no idea. So I was just playing guitar in bands and stuff. Dropped out of school because I was doing terribly. Oh my word. My life could have gone in like, I've never really spoken about it, but my life really, really could have gone in a really bad direction. Without sort of like getting into the weeds. It you know, I could have very easily ended up in prison, like, or like dead. You know, and it's a conversation.
Hanging out with the wrong crew.
Oh, with the wrong crew, dude. Like level 10. Well, actually, level 10 being sort of like, oh, well, you've made the decision, and you are doing bad stuff with the wrong crew. I was like a level 7 or 8, as in sort of like I was actually thinking, oh, maybe this is. I'm not sure what I'm doing in my life. Maybe I should just go and like do this thing with these guys. Yeah. Like it was
maybe I should go and do
bad
crime with these guys.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right. Yeah. It was really bad. I was like totally lost in life, and I'd had some sort of like weird stuff happen to me earlier on in my like sort of like early teens and stuff that kind of like sent me off in this weird direction. Anyway, kind of like ended up getting this apprenticeship, and the guy that was running it was like, hey man, have you even thought about being a pro musician or something? Like you're really good. I was like, a pro what? He was like, you know, like playing for a living. I was like, what are you even talking about? Like, you mean in a famous band? And he was like, no, not in a famous band. Like, just as a professional musician, you know, like jobbing, doing sessions, and maybe you can work in theaters, and maybe you can. I was like, I didn't even know that world existed. So that was kind of like opened up to me through working at that place. And then I sucked at being a luthier, partly because I was still not in a great place, sort of like personally, but then also that I just, you know, I'm not that great with my hands. I'm just actually, do you know, like some people can, like, you give them a bit of wood and a knife, and like, you know, an hour later they'll hand you like a perfectly carved chess piece. I'm not that guy, right?
Oh, and so, dude, sanding a bass. I remember you saying something about sanding a bass all day. It never ends. I mean, I was just out at Spectre and seeing those guys sanding all frickin' day. It's brutal. You gotta love it, and if you don't love it, get out.
Exactly, right? So it was brutal. So, and then through that, so I was kind of like coming to this weird end, I guess, sort of like at my time at Overwater. And I knew it was coming to an end, and like, and at some point I'd sort of like got a job offer, well, not a job offer, but I got a job interview at my dad's factory that he was working at.
Yes.
And he was on the factory line there. So I almost went and did that. And I was just, I didn't know what I was going to do. And just, you know, like luck happened to step into my life, and this guy came into the shop, the workshop, and said, do you know any bass players? And this was to my boss at the time. Do you know any bass players? I've got a medical condition going on. I need somebody to actually step into this theater that I'm playing at a few miles away, like a full-on like professional theater. And Chris was like, and honestly, I think Chris knew and wanted me to go do something else. He was like, this kid is not going, and you know, like he's probably not going to work here forever. He might end up working in a factory. He's good. He's not going into like, you know, what he should be going into. And he was like, he can do it. So he randomly got me this gig, and I was like, nowhere near good enough to do the gig.
Right.
But it was like, I went and did it, and I survived. We like just randomly happened to survive. And that was my, like, I can remember like doing that first gig on like being in like with the musicians, like pro musicians for the first time in my life, and doing it. And it was like, oh, this is what I want to do with my life. So I'd kind of been open to the suggestion of it by working at Overwater, but I still didn't believe that I was going to go and do it. But it was doing that gig, I was like, oh, this is insane. This is like so cool. I didn't even believe
this
is a lot easier than sanding basses.
Oh,
you know,
it's so much work.
Exactly.
I haven't even done it, and I see it happening in front of me, and it feels like a ton. I mean, I feel like I'm doing it.
It's obscene. It's obscene. And then I ended up, and that was it, really. And then I was off. It was like, woo, I was off down that, you know, and it was bumpy and all of that. And I had to get jobs in music stores and move to other cities. And like, I freaking worked my ass off. And at one point, I worked in a music shop and got offered a full-time gig at the same time, which was a 2 hours 20 drive away. So I had a full-time job in a music shop, and then I got offered a gig in a theater that was like 2.5 hours away.
Yeah.
And I held both of those gigs for like 7 or 8 months. So I'd work in the shop in the daytime, and then I'd drive 2.5 hours to the theater, do the gig, crash at somebody's place, sometimes at my parents' place, and then wake up at 4 a.m. and drive back down to the music shop gig. And I did that, like, it was insane. It nearly killed me, but I was so desperate to make it work. I was like, I am not losing that dream. I'm not losing the dream. So I just carried on doing it, and then basically, and that's how I got into it. So for me, there was not really a moment. It kind of like I fell into it really luckily, and like I'm always like super grateful and thankful that I did, because it wouldn't have gone the way it has done if I hadn't done that.
Well, I want to ask you a follow-up question then, because I we've talked about kind of our growing up and getting into music, and I remember that whole thing about Overwater, and you got in, and you're working at a bass, you're a guitar player, and then someone comes in and asks you to play the bass, and it changes your life, and then all the auditions and stuff. I love those stories. You've got great stories about auditioning for the cruise ships and how you had a variety of different and so it was this natural progression, and then you see this thing YouTube come along, and you wonder about that. And let me ask you this then. So you're a musician. YouTube has come along. You've uploaded some videos. Was there a moment for you of discomfort? Because I think, here's what I think. That question around when should you quit your day job, I think is actually, that real question is, when should you decide to be really uncomfortable in a decision? So do you have a story or a moment? I mean, you've talked to me about like how Lisa was so wonderful to you in the very beginning and, held things together while you really went out on a limb to make SBL work. And I wonder if there's a tale of like, okay, I have to do this. I'm keep it at this level, but to get to the next level, I need to risk. I need to feel uncomfortable. I need to feel like things are in the breeze a bit. And if you can describe that time.
Yeah. So, well, I guess just for context as well, that when I did go and do, hey, I'm going to go and do the YouTube thing, let me think about this. So I'd been diagnosed with focal dystonia. So I was told I couldn't work as a musician anymore. That's right. So it was like, it wasn't almost a decision. It's like somebody like pushed me off the cliff, What?
Yes.
I was pushed off the cliff, hit the water, and then it's like, oh, you can sink or swim, like your choice. So for me, I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I did know. I guess sort of like, just to point out, I'm super tenacious. If you drop me in the sort of like in the jungle, I'd be fine. Like, I fear the monkeys. You know what I mean? I will catch a monkey and eat it. I just sort of like
figure it out.
It might not come across sometimes, but I'm going to be fine. Like, sorry monkeys, but I'm going to be fine. You don't want to sort of like, if we're ever in a plane together, Ian, and we crash and there's just me and you in the plane, you don't want to be with me, because I'm going to try and eat you.
This went very quickly from a tale of inspiration and what have we done to I will eat you, dude. I will eat you. Remind me, we're gonna be separate flights then.
Loads of peanut butter and jelly. It's like, what's all the PB&J about, dude?
Like, because I don't want Scott to gnaw my arm off. That's why.
Yeah. I'll be like, you know what? I think we need something to eat. I think that. Have you ever thought about chopping off your arm? But so I was in this like sink or swim kind of like I guess sort of like Yeah, I was just in this kind of place where I was just like, I need to do something. So I had definitely decided that it needed to be music, because I've put too much time and effort into it to sort of like go and do something else. So what I thought to myself is two options was, one, I could go and become a music teacher in a school. Oh, I really didn't want to do that, but it was definitely an option I was looking at.
Yep.
And then the other was, I could go and make classical guitars. I know that sounds super random, right? But I don't know. I just was drawn to, maybe I've played classical guitar in my past, and I love the idea of acoustic instruments.
Yeah, and being a luthier.
Yeah, but like I'm drawn more towards acoustic instruments than the electric instruments, which makes no sense because I don't really play any acoustic. I play electric bass. If I play guitar, it would probably be an electric guitar. You know, I'd have the distortion on, but for whatever reason, as a craft, I am drawn towards acoustic instruments.
Oh, I get that. It feels like it feels like ancient and
exactly
right,
yeah.
And all of this tradition and knowledge, and it's been around for hundreds of years. I totally get that.
Yeah,
I think there's something
aesthetic about it. Yeah,
versus kind of crank something through a CNC. Even though there's a lot that goes into making an electric instrument, I understand that the acoustic instrument feels more of like a handcrafted tradition or something.
Yeah, exactly. So in this time, I'm sort of like I'm like thinking, and the outlier is, well, I guess the sort of like the strange one of the two is the classical guitar maker, And for context, there is a classical guitar making school, a really big, famous one, down in Newark in the UK. I say big, but it's like it's in a really good school for guitar making, and it was probably a 2-hour drive away. So I was like, or maybe even like 90 minutes or something like that. So it was doable. So it came down to these two: like, am I going to be a music teacher? Am I going to go make classical guitars? Yeah. And knowing that I didn't. So the fly in the ointment, I guess, is that I've made basses before, and I didn't feel I was that natural at it. But I was like, maybe I was selling myself short. Maybe I could go do it. Yeah. So as I said earlier, I'm going to eat the monkeys. So, and then on the other, and I don't think I wanted to be a teacher. So I kind of decided, like 75%, I was going to go be a classical guitar maker.
Yeah.
I'll go do a classical. I'm going to retrain and do that whole thing. And then the whole YouTube thing, it just kicked off. When I say kicked off, I hit 50 subscribers. like that's actually what happened. Yeah.
Moving up, baby. We're moving up.
Yeah. So, and I started like uploading these videos on YouTube, really just to like, not to actually, hey, I'm going to go do this thing. It was more like, I need to teach so I can pay the damn rent because I've got no money. So I was like teaching via Skype, and I was getting those students by putting YouTube videos on. And then I saw this video, it's like, hey, you can have an online business, and you can, and then I watched that YouTube video and I was like, oh, maybe I've got another option. Maybe it's not music teaching. Maybe the actual two options that I've got are, you can either go make classical guitars or learn how to make them, or you can try and start an online business. And dude, I actually got like, I was going to go to the, what's it called? Like not an audition, but the interview for the classical guitar school. Yeah. And I kind of knew I'd get in just because I had sort of like experience in the past and stuff like that.
Right.
And I had the interview, and I put my rucksack on, and I was like, should I go or not? Should I go? And I was like, and I kind of knew that if I went down there, I was going to meet people. I'd probably feel good. There'd be connection there. And I can remember running up to the bedroom like 6:30 in the morning, and Lisa was lying in bed, and I was like, Lisa. I was stood there with my jacket on, the rucksack, about to get in the car and drive to Newark Guitar Making School.
This is incredible. I
said, Lisa, I was like, should I go? And she went, what do you mean? And she said, and I said, should I do this guitar making thing, or should I just focus on the YouTube thing and try and grow a business? And she was like, well, I don't know. What do you want to do? I was like, I'm not sure. And I was like in the bedroom, sort of like with the light off.
This is amazing.
And my rucksack on. And she was like, you've got to make a decision. And I think she said, I can't fully remember, but I think she said something like, I think she tilted me more towards the, like, why don't you do this online? She basically said, if you go, you're probably going to do it. You're probably going to get in. So really have a hard think about this, because you might think that the decision is going to come after the fact, but it actually might be today that you need to make that decision. I was like, oh, dude. So for me, it was, and then I just had to take the jump and do the YouTube thing. And then I called and cancelled, and then that
the
was
rucksack comes off, the jacket comes off. Whoa.
Yeah.
I love that you were that close. I actually wasn't expecting that it was
close.
that close. Wow.
Yeah, it was close, yeah.
Oh man,
I even remember
amazing.
what rucksack I had. It was a brown leather rucksack. I got it, you know.
And you knew deep down that I could do this. It's going to be maybe the safer bet, right? So do you feel that resonance around this is not really just a decision of should I quit this or should I do this? It's this thing about fear, and it's a thing about being uncomfortable, because maybe the more comfortable choice for you in that way was just, go on down, check it out, see, you're probably gonna get in. You worked at Overwater. This is, you said so yourself, like, I'm probably gonna get in. You're gonna meet some nice folks, and then it'll be like a safe, easy situation. Whereas the YouTube thing, that's the frickin' Wild West, right? Like, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. But I think that, do you know what? I always think about it like this, right? There's two types of decision. There's a decision that, like, once you make it, there is no going back. And there are also decisions that are actually really flexible, but because of our, I guess that insecurities and fears and stuff like that, we feel that, like, there's no going back. So actually, when I look at it objectively, I'm like, actually, it would have been cool either way. It would have been cool, actually. I think it wasn't a decision that if I'd gone and done the YouTube thing and it hadn't worked out, well, it didn't work out. I can go do something else. I can do the classical guitar thing. If I'd done the classical guitar, I think it's flexible. So I think that when people are thinking about doing, like, quitting a day job, is it something like what kind of decision is it? Is it a decision that you're never going to be able to go back to, or is it actually something that you could give it a crack for 6 months or 12 months? And what's the worst that could happen? Like, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah. And that's a really great question to ask too, because, if you're listening to this and you're hearing Scott's tale of, like, choosing the YouTube thing, and it's a little more fearful, or there's not as much assurances on that other side, don't hear us saying, make that record and put your house, like, get a second mortgage on your house so that you can make the art that you, because what's the worst thing that can happen?
That you can't go back from. Yeah, you can't go back from it. Yeah, you can't go back from it. I think that's when, like, it falls under that, this is a decision that I can't go back from. It's actually putting things at risk and stuff like that. So, but for me, I think it's a helpful to think about what kind of decision it is. And whether it's as big as we really think it is.
Yes.
And for me, just to put it out there, if you're thinking like you should quit your day job and go and chase the dream, you should probably chase the dream.
Yeah.
Like, I can't think of many valid reasons why you shouldn't, unless it's very, very, very financially based. And there's big stuff going on around that. So, like, if it's not financially based, you should absolutely chase the dream.
Yeah. And I think too, there's so many hours, we think that we're so busy. We think that we're so, that there's not any more hours in the day to do anything. But if you really did look at your day and how much you do leisure activities, I mean, I'm not trying to indict anyone here, because it's for me too. Like, how much time are you on your phone? How much time are you spending watching shows? Like, if you really have this thing that's burning inside of you around, I've always wanted to do that thing, could you carve out an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours from that leisure time that you experience from 8 p.m. to midnight, 8 p.m. to 9:30, that you could really see, well, if I spent an hour working on my website, if I spent 45 minutes practicing these tunes, if I spent 2 hours thinking about a social media strategy on TikTok, what would that do to give you more confidence around chasing that dream, right? It's one thing, chasing the dream sounds awesome. It sounds like a movie, like a montage. It's going to be awesome. 80s music, and you're going to be kicking and punching, and like breaking through the barriers. But to actually do it, I think, is probably more around habits, wouldn't you say? Like thinking about how much time can you devote to this thing, and can you get it in your schedule? So if you work a day job and you don't love it, when you come home, instead of just like eating dinner and then watching shows and kind of trying to disconnect and like recharge your batteries, could part of the recharge process for you be working on your website because you sew little stuffed animals that you want to sell on Etsy? or like, could you think about that in terms of leisure time? Could you reframe it and start to think about what you really want to do as recharging versus like, I hate my day job and I want to completely disconnect? Because if you do that and you're just watching Netflix, I would say don't quit your day job because maybe you haven't done some real work in investing toward what the next thing is.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also sort of like setting a financial limit for yourself in terms of like, what is the bottom? Like, what do you actually need so you're not stressed out and, and you can feed your kids, or if you've got no kids, like, what is the bottom? Like, it might actually surprise you what you can go down to. If you've got no kids and you don't own a house and you're just paying rent, what can you go down to? Because we all get very comfortable sometimes in the situation that we're in. But if you're thinking about making a switch, you should figure out, well, what do I have to make money-wise to actually be cool? Because once you work that out, then it kind of frames everything. You can be like, okay, well, now I know sort of like where the baseline is in terms of, I did that on purpose. So once you know where the baseline is to sort of like what you need to earn to sort of like have food and pay rent and stuff like that, then also think to yourself, well, you're probably not going to make 100% of that thing, what you need, through gigging. Because what musician does, right? What pro musician out there in the space doesn't teach? No, but everybody teaches.
It's so true.
Everybody teaches,
true.
Right?
Yes.
Well, 99.9, right?
That's right.
So okay, so you know your baseline of what you need to earn. Okay, well, can I get some sort of like, can I get 10 students a week? Can I get 15 students a week?
Right.
Can you teach a couple of days a week, right? Via Skype or Zoom or in person or in schools or whatever it is, but teaching, right? A little bit of teaching gives you a little bit more income. Okay, then look at your baseline. Okay, well, how much now do I need to make up in revenue, in money, to be set free and go and be a full-time professional musician or whatever you want in life, So I'd probably do it in that way as well, just sort of like trying to figure out how to strategically go about it.
Yeah, and I think too, as wide as you can cast your vision for what you want to do. So say it's be a professional musician. I told this story in a solo podcast that I did, but I did couples counseling with Emily before we were married, and the counselor said, write down a professional goal and a personal goal. Don't think about it, don't judge it, write the first thing that comes to your mind. And what I wrote for my professional goal was support my family by playing the bass. And that sentence was very illuminating for me. It told me a few things. It told me that I wanted a family, which I don't even know that I'd ever really admitted before. And then it didn't say by being in that famous band, by only playing cool sessions, by being a college professor playing the bass, by going on tour. No, it said by playing the bass. And I looked at that sentence and went, whoa, okay, that actually means that it doesn't have to be my rock band that I've poured the whole decade of my 20s into. It doesn't need to be. It could be playing some wedding gigs. It could be doing some teaching. It could be playing some church gigs. It could be going on tour. It could be playing on records. It could be, right? Yeah. It's this wide variety of things. And that set me free, as opposed to sort of a lofty goal of I'm only gonna be playing the bass with an awesome touring artist. Well, geez, that does not just happen. That is not like, well, now I'm gonna go to Nashville and I'm gonna break down the doors and I'm gonna audition for everything and I'm gonna get a sweet gig. No, oh man, it happens because the wedding gig that you played on Friday night, you met the keyboard player that plays in. Right.
And when you wrote that down, were you actually full-time as a musician, or was it something that when you were like, oh, this is what I need to go do?
I think that I was. I'm trying to think if that was still when I I may have still been working at a music store part-time, and it kind of felt like that's the thing that I needed to let go. I actually used to work at Mars Music, which was sort of like a competitor for a very short time in the States of Guitar Center. And it ended up filing for bankruptcy, and it completely folded. I think there were like 60 stores, and the whole chain went out of business. And so that decision was made for me. Where like I didn't say, I would love to be like, yeah, and one day I just quit and it was time, but that ship sunk. Yeah. And I was
so you were pushed off the cliff as well.
I was. Yeah, and I was like, oh. And I mean, I think that I've told you this before, but I called my old man, old Bob Allison, and said, Dad, should I do the
law
because
exam.
he's a lawyer, right? And actually now he's a district court judge, but he was a lawyer for a long time, a solo practitioner too, not in a firm, doing it on his own. And that it was a tough road. And I asked him, I've told this before, but I'll just briefly say it again. I said, Dad, what do you think? Should I go do the LSAT and do law school, kind of like you did, dear old Dad? And there's a pause, and on the phone he goes, well, let me ask you one question, Ian. I said, okay. He goes, do you want to hate your fucking life? And I mean, it was brilliant, right? Because he said, you've never talked about this before. No. Don't you want to do music? And I said, yeah, I do, and we've talked about this. And I remember too, you've got a great story about your dad pulling your application from the factory. There's Roger, right? Roger pulls it out and says, no way my son is going to work at the factory here. He needs to be doing something. So I was really lucky for that experience too, because I think if my father would have said, oh yeah, let's do this, I may have gone down that road in terms of thinking about something safe and something that was going to be maybe that had more that I at least perceived to have results that were tangible, because this music thing, God, I mean, who knows, right?
It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was really about, I got pushed out of the day job gig at the time, which was the music store. And then it was, what are all the things that I could do with this instrument that I could still feel like I'm making a living being a musician, focusing on this instrument. And for me, that has always been very wide. So I love that idea of like, you're going to be doing some teaching, you're going to be doing some gigging. Hopefully you're going to be making some some creativity, some projects that you're really excited about. But it's all of these things that come together to form what a musical identity is, or at least that's certainly been the case for me.
Oh man, yeah. So I guess sort of like that is so good. I love your dad. What did he say? Just say it again. What did he say? He
said, "Let me ask you one question. Do you want to hate your fucking life?"
It's amazing.
And the answer, the answer to that is no.
It is amazing, isn't it?
Oh, so great.
Here's the deal, man. I think that these two statements can be pretty much true for everybody. So I'll share them, right? Two statements, please, just to get every kind of sort of like thinking about it. And it's not whether to sort of like it's kind of like in alignment with whether you should quit your day job or not, but it's just sort of like a broader question just for people to kind of like ponder on, right?
Yeah.
Number one is that I think that in general, we're all not thinking big enough.
Yeah.
I just think, because of the nature of being a human, I think that we're all not thinking big enough.
Yeah.
I think that we could be, we should be thinking big. Our challenges, the challenges that we have, they should probably be a lot bigger, and we could probably overcome them, or at least, like get to that next one. I think that we could just, we can think bigger. And number two is that we're probably all a lot capable of doing like more than what we're doing. I think that I love to think that I'm like much more capable of I'm like more capable of what I'm doing now, and I want to sort of like grow to sort of like the maximum, or like whatever that is, of who I am as a person, you know?
Yeah.
So I think there are two things, like just thinking really big, and like when you think you're thinking big, like, are you like question, like, are you actually thinking big? Like, does it actually scare you? Like that big? And then, you know, and also just being comfortable with, you know, you're probably a lot more capable than you giving yourself the, I guess the sort of like the agency of being like, you can probably achieve a lot more. Like, I think it's just framing it like that. It'll be an interesting thought experiment for people to go through. Are you thinking big enough?
I love that. And it's really encouraging. Like, are you actually thinking big enough? Not like, you know, there's this, I just got to play this show with this great artist named Dessa, and she has this great lyric where she says, we don't say, I think the lyric is, we always say, be careful, stay safe. We don't say, go out and be brave. And I love that. I've thought a lot about that lyric.
Oh, dude, that is huge. That is huge.
Be careful, stay safe. Be safe, be careful, be safe. We don't say go out and be brave. And I think, of course, there are a lot of things we want as parents. We want our kids to be safe. We want our friends and family. We want to stay safe. I'm not saying go out and you know, do things to risk yourself and life and limb, or, you know, your fellow humans. Yeah. But in terms of risk, in terms of dream, in terms of chasing something, why aren't we saying to more people, go out, be brave?
Yeah, 100%, man. Like when we had kids, something I was told all the time when I was a kid was, don't speak to strangers. Don't speak to strangers. Don't speak to strangers, right? And I said to Lisa when we had our first, I was like, we will never, ever, ever say don't speak to strangers to them. Yeah. In fact, we're going to say the opposite. We were like, speak to everybody. Yeah. And we actually, you know, if we're going to a coffee shop, we try and get the kids to order the coffee. We're pushing them to actually like, Engage, lean into it, be uncomfortable, be at one with being uncomfortable. Oh, I don't want to do it. Oh, do you feel uncomfortable? Yeah, well, it's cool, because if you do this sort of like 3 or 4 times, you're not going to feel uncomfortable anymore.
That's right.
You know, and I think that and when people are thinking big, you know, it's going to feel uncomfortable.
Of course, yeah. And it might even feel impossible. I mean, you know, like I need this too. I need this just as much as anybody else. I need to think bigger. I need to think that I can do more things. I get in a lane and it starts to feel comfortable and I go, whew, okay, there. All right, good. Hey.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
me too, man.
Always better. Yeah, of course, right? I mean, that's human nature. I think, though, that whenever we get pushed, whenever we get bumped out of our zone, it's when the most growth happens, of course, right? And you look back and realize, wow, I can't believe that I accomplished that, and I don't know that I would have made that decision on my own. Sometimes it takes those external factors to bump you out.
Yeah. And we tend to do more of that. We tend to do it more when we're kids as well. We tend to risk more, even though there's probably no risk in it sometimes, to my earlier point. I mean, like, is there actually any real risk, or is it just sort of like bullshit that we're telling ourselves?
Yeah,
is it just like a risk to your ego and your self-esteem, right?
Yeah.
So I think that
that's good.
We're a little less inexperienced with I guess pain and all of that when we're younger, so we tend to sort of like put ourselves out there more, or at least I feel like we do. Yes. So when we do it, or when we're older, I think that it's I don't know, I just think we need to be really conscious of it. We need to be really conscious of thinking big, of telling ourselves, you know, oh, I am actually, you know, I can achieve more than I am right now. I can really achieve, and like telling ourselves this, like they're just constantly kind of sort of like saying it inside your mind. This is what I'm trying to do all the time. I'm trying to tell myself, I mean, we can do this better. And I'm actually doing this for the entire team, the SBL team.
Yes.
We can do more. We can do more. We can do.
Yeah.
I'm not even saying it about myself. I'm saying it about everybody. And just to share a sort of like a personal note before we call it. Like I've had this I had this sort of like moment, I guess, over the last sort of like couple of months when I've been toying with this this idea over maybe like 2 or 3 years, and really sort of, and it excites me, but it just felt too big. It just felt too big, and for whatever reason, I kind of shied away from it, probably because of bullshit reasons that I'm telling myself, you know, like I can try and, you know, I can rationalize everything, right? But, you know, well, I can't rationalize everything, but, you know,
I know. Yeah, I know what you mean.
No, it's because of this, it's because it's that, it's not the right time, yada, yada, bullshit. But over like the last 2 months, I watched a video on YouTube, and this video, man, he was just sort of like, it's like he kicked me in the balls. I can't even remember what he said, but he said something like, oh, he was talking to a group of, and like early 40-year-olds like us, right?
Yep.
And these were successful individuals, and he was like, and he just like, he kind of roasted them, but in a loving way. He was like, stop thinking so small.
Yeah.
He was like, if you work until sort of like the average age of retirement, even if you ever want to retire, that you might not want to, he said, you have 25 years left to actually chase your dreams.
Right.
Like, what are you going to do with that? 25 years. And I was like, oh,
yeah.
And I kind of, it just hit me like I needed to hear that at the time. And I was like, oh, I really need, so I've been sort of like trying to lean into this idea that I had that I want to do. And man, it feels really big. It feels scary big. And honestly, I've got no idea how it's going to pan out and how we're going to do it. But I do feel great that I feel like I found sort of like a really big, I guess like a big dream, big challenge that is. And then when I ask that question, but is it really big? I'm like, oh no, this is really big. And I think that, so I just kind of want to get everybody on the same page. I want everybody listening to this to be like the same, like go through that. Like, what is big for you? Like, what is it? Is it quitting the day job? Is that big? Or is that maybe just sort of like a gateway to something much, much bigger? And if it is a gateway to something much bigger, like what is that thing? Like, can you name it? Can you get your hands around it and just...
Even if it feels like, even if it feels like maybe there'd be some people in your friends group or family that would laugh at you, can you name it yourself? Can you name the thing that feels scary, but that you've always deep down kind of wanted? You want to chase it. It maybe feels really far away. It's probably not as far away as you think, right?
Yeah, isn't it strange? Like everybody in sort of like school, I was thinking about this the other day, actually. Everybody in school everybody in school kind of wants the same thing when they get to 15. They all want a car. Everybody wants a car, you know, and like their parents are like, yeah, you might get a car when you're 17 and stuff like that.
Sure.
And then I was thinking, I wonder what Elon Musk's kids are thinking. I wonder if they're thinking about having a car. Oh, I wonder if he's like, I wonder if you're going to invent a car.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because he thinks massive. And like maybe his kids are thinking, they're not thinking about cars. They're thinking like, are they going to invent some new technology that's just... And I guess, you know, they're probably thinking that, or maybe because they've got somebody in their life that's just given them the, like, I guess sort of like the framed what challenges they should be, you know, running after.
Dude, it reminds me of one of my very favorite Rage Against the Machine lyrics from the great Zach De La Rocha. I love this lyric. It is, fuck the G-Ride, I want the machines that are making them. I love that lyric.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
I love that lyric. Yeah, because everybody's focused on the car. Everybody's focused on getting the item that there's some big monster corporation that is selling you. But what if you were in control of the machines that were making that product, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember when I first heard that lyric as a teenager, I had never even thought of such a thing. I was like,
it's so cool, isn't it?
I just want the car. But yeah,
I think like how we think as well. I think that how we think is, to our, I think was it in our earlier podcast that were like last week that we're talking about jazz. Like the way that we, like what you think is so fucking important.
Yeah.
It's actually everything, what you think. Yeah. So the reason, like in the last podcast, we both told stories where we met people that actually changed the direction of our life. Yours was Brian Bromberg.
That's right.
Mine was this really cool guy on a cruise ship, a passenger who was just sort of like opened my mind. But really, when you bought, they just changed the way we thought.
Yeah,
that's what happened.
That's right. That's right.
We had a certain thing that we thought, and they were just sort of, no. Just like, let's change the way you think.
Yes.
They changed the way we thought, so therefore we can actually take our life in a completely different direction just from what we think. So it is so important how we think, how we just think about problems and how we think about our thinking. That's something like, how do you think about your thinking?
Right.
Oh, so good.
Getting pretty meta.
I love that question. Like, do you know when you're sort of like faced with a problem or a challenge or a decision and you're thinking about it? Well, think about how you're thinking about it.
Yeah. What do your thoughts go to? Is it fear? Do your thoughts go to fear? Do your thoughts go to defense? Or do your thoughts go to inspiration, growth, offense? Yeah. That's
is it rational?
It's a great question.
Is it
even rational?
Yes, right. A lot of the time, it's probably not rational. You're probably just sort of like gathering up all of that information over your X amount of years that you've lived, and that is, you're like, oh well, that means this thing here, and you're like, but really, like probably if you think about it objectively or rationally, probably not. Yeah. Anyway, dude. Oh, it's been a good one, dude.
So in wrapping up, should you quit your day job, Scott Devine?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Unless I'll just say, if I was sitting in the pub with somebody and somebody was like having a conversation with me and they were like, I freaking really want to go do this thing, I'd just be like, well, go do the thing. Like if there's not any sort of like real massive reason why you can't do it, if it's just sort of like if it's a bit risky or whatever, I mean, like you've got to weigh the risk. If it's going to be detrimental to the rest of your life, and you really think about it, and it really is detrimental. Like this is once you make this decision, there is no going back. Yeah. Then have a think about it.
Have a think about it,
and still maybe do it. But if
right,
yeah. Absolutely, right. and still like possibly do it. But you know, if there's just sort of like, you know, BS reasons, just freaking go for it.
Check this out real quick before we wrap it up. I remember talking to Jack Rohn, who makes the Noble DI.
Oh yeah,
and he was working in a company as an IT guy. I think that's right. He was working, you know, as like a, I think in technology as an IT rep. And he was making guitar amps. That's how he started. And then he had a friend that suggested, wow, you know, bass players are really fascinated by DIs. And I think that A Design's Ready had come out. And anyway, he designed this cool black rectangle that had tubes in it. It powered other pedals. And then he told me, he was like, I don't know if anybody's going to care about it. And then people started to care about it. And he thought, I wonder if this is something that I could quit my job and just make this. And he had this dream of being in his garage in San Jose, working with his hands, making these boxes one at a time, interacting with customers, sending them out. And he was like, if I can sell 100 of them or something in the first year.
He worked at the baseline.
I'm going to, that's right. He was like, then I'm going to quit my job. And he sold like 300 of them. And he quit his job. And
amazing.
Now but he did it smart. He did it really smart. And now he is doing exactly what he wants to do. He could scale it. He could grow it. But he's a one-man operation in his garage. He's got a wife, 2 kids. He gets to do his thing every day. And it was a big risk to just make this one sort of niche-y product, you know, that everybody fell in love with, myself included. So that story was really inspirational to me. I mean, you know, he was like, oh, can I make this one widget? Will this be enough? And it's been more than enough for him.
Oh man, cool. That is let's end it on that one because it's great. If somebody wants to go check out Noble as well, what's the website?
I think it's Noble Amps, NOBLEAMPS.com. And I think if you look at that too on
They're so
Instagram,
sexy. They're so sexy.
Yeah, they're amazing. And they're beautiful problem solvers. They sound great, very aesthetically cool. Yeah, wonderful product.
Dude, let's call it.
All right.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, take it easy, guys. See you in a bit. Bye.
Cheers, everybody.